You listen to me, Clemkin Diddlehopper, and you listen good. 1.2 trillion lines of lethal software code.
Yeah, and 30 billion embedded microchips.
All going down.
Hey, hello, how do you do? Shady Doorags here. Happy New Year's, everyone. It's January and I'm a YouTuber. You know what that means. I'm about to be broke. But joke's on the system, my New Year's resolution was to not be broke. So to get ahead of the curve, let's start the year off with the moneymaker of the channel, King of the Hill. And if you're good, maybe I'll think about doing some Teen Titans. Today we're looking at the episode Helenium. Now what inspired me to talk about this episode was...
Shut up, we don't care. Just get to the review, you annoying Saber Spark knockoff.
Well, okay. Well, thankfully for you guys, my New Year's resolution is to listen to my audience more. The episode starts with Hank buying a Christmas tree. Once again, no cotton and no shotgun. I'm starting to think continuity lied to me. I love this opening shot of Hank in a snow globe. It's not necessary, but it shows a love for presentation and forced perspective in a way we don't normally get to see in this show. It's one of those moments that makes you feel like the animators had fun putting it together. Hank compliments the tree seller Chappie on his wares, but unfortunately the dude's got one too many letters in his name. Because he isn't happy. Oh my goodness, must I explain every joke?
Sorry, Hank, but people ain't buying trees this year. It's the millennium, Hank.
That's crazy. Everyone's known about the millennium for almost a year now.
So at first I thought Hank was saying everyone has known about the year 2000 since the year 1999, which made me think the episode was trying to tell a really funny joke, but no. When these two say the millennium, they're specifically talking about Y2K. Obviously, you all know what Y2K was, but it's my New Year's resolution to stop assuming things, so... In the 1990s, computers universally assumed it was the 1900s and used only the last two digits when determining what year it was. The year 1999 was just read as 99. This meant that when the year 2000 eventually came along, computers would read the year as 1900. You know how basically every little asset of our world is run by computers now? Well, the late 20th century is when all that got started, so an issue like Y2K could have had a domino effect, leading to much bigger problems. Despite living through Y2K, I didn't really experience it. I was only 8 at the time and had more pressing things to worry about, like whether I would get a blue Game Boy Color or a green one. Shoot, for years when people said Y2K, I corrected them and said, actually, it's Y2J. His name isn't Carico. But according to those who did experience it, Y2K wasn't just hysteria. It was a real problem, just one that got fixed well before the turn of the year. By the time the 2000s actually came around, there were some computers that had issues, but the damage done was barely noticeable. So when Hank says,
everyone's known about the millennium for almost a year now,
he's saying they've had plenty of time to fix this well-known problem, and he isn't wrong. Hank isn't worried because he has faith in the system.
You know, I have on good authority from Murray Hogarth that there will be no disruption of essential services.
Chappie says he also isn't worried because he doesn't rely on the system.
Well, I'm not panicking. I live in a shack. I poop in an outhouse. I eat what I kill.
There isn't a Mrs. Chappie, is there, Chappie?
I can't tell if that's a dig at Chappie's charisma or a mention that if Chappie had a wife, there's no way he'd get away with living the way he does. So Hank goes to the boys to talk about Y2K. Surprising everyone, Dale of all people says he's got faith that the government will take care of things.
Team USA.
Well, it's taken 2,000 years, but Dale, you're finally making sense.
Hank, those words out of your mouth should have been the first sign that things were off. Later, we see Dale is a filthy stinking liar. As expected, he is over-prepared for a situation where the world is about to end.
No one's gonna catch the big D off guard. Ha!
I know we're supposed to think Dale is the looniest of the loons, but I was always taught that if you can afford it and have the space, keeping emergency rations on hand is a good thing. You never know if nor when disaster is gonna strike. It's when everyone waits just before it strikes to overbuy and hoard that you start facing problems.
The real problem will be obtaining fresh meat. A breeding pair of gerbils.
One of those is a hamster.
After a month of eating cockroaches, you will be begging for gerbster.
So it turns out gerbster is a real thing. I mean, I don't know if that's what they're called, but hamsters and gerbils can indeed mate with each other and produce offspring. However, apparently it's a really bad idea to try something like this because hamsters have been known to do horrible things when their territory is invaded. We transition to the hills where Bobby and Luann are helping Peggy.
Although there is no L in Christmas, there is Noel in Christmas.
Oh, I see. The second one is Noel.
My New Year's resolution is to be more instructional, so it's time for a little amateur teaching and humor. What Peggy did was make a witty observation. Noel and Noel sound alike. However, Peggy didn't structure the observation in a humorous way. The first part of the sentence is brought up out of nowhere as opposed to being a relevant lead-in. This is why a lot of jokes start with a question or knock knock. The sentence is also saying the same thing twice, which leads people to dismissing it. If it were saying something contradictory, that would make them think twice about it. And lastly, as Bobby demonstrates, the joke is confusing if it's spoken instead of being read. A better iteration would be, why is the word Christmas constantly winning? Because it has Noel. Boom, triple entendre.
That is very funny, Mom. Laugh.
Cut! Louette, darling, you are beautiful, you are wonderful, you are stupendous! But the laugh, I'm not feeling the laugh, darling. Now, same scene, but this time, give me the most adorable laugh you can conjure up. Action!
That is very funny, Mom. Laugh.
Perfect! Hank comes in and invites the family to go out shopping with him. They head down to the Megla Mart and see how Y2K is affecting shoppers.
There's a run on triple ply bunny soft.
What? Thanks for telling me.
This guy. I, to this day, do not understand this guy. Why does he just run up to the hills, tell them this, and then leave? He didn't even finish bringing the toilet paper to the aisle he was supposed to be going to. And yes, I know this toilet paper shenanigan is very similar to what happened during the pandemic. Everyone has pointed that out. Like I said earlier, it's better to keep a surplus of supplies before an emergency hits. And the neat thing about toilet paper is that if stored correctly, it doesn't expire for decades. The toilet paper man's very disturbing actions almost make Bobby panic, but because Hank, Bobby's role model, is calm, Bobby calms down as well. However, a nearby woman overhears their conversation.
I used to work for Dell Computer. I know things.
I remember when working for a company like Dell would have been a dream come true for me. Now my computer science degree collects dust while my YouTube play button actually gets me that cha-ching.
I have a K-Pro. Now, can you tell me if it will be Y2K compliant?
Tell me you know very little about computers without telling me you know very little about computers. Even in 1999, the K-Pro was an extremely obsolete product. It came out in the 80s. This is what a K-Pro looks like in IRL, and these are what typical home computers were like in the late 90s and early 2000s. Peggy, it is well past time for an upgrade. As expected, the Dell woman laughs at Peggy mentioning a K-Pro. This causes Peggy to be the first hill to panic about Y2K.
I need hard copies. I could lose everything, Hank.
Now keep in mind, Peggy is not concerned about Y2K in general. She's just scared of how it will affect her computer. This will be important later. Given what just happened, Hank decides it's a good idea to get Peggy a new computer for Christmas and asks Dale for help.
I'm gonna get her a new computer.
A computer?
Notice how Bill is in this shot. Not an accident. This is the first we see of Hank's lack of computer knowledge, which is what motivates his actions later. So Hank and Dale head to the computer store, and remember when it was normal to see people riding in the back of a truck instead of worrying about seatbelt laws all the time?
It's a shame to see all our friends and neighbors acting so selfish.
I mean, if everyone hoards, there will be nothing left to go around.
You and I seem to be the only ones around here that have our heads on straight.
Completely straight.
Those words should have been the second sign that things were off with Dale. Before going to the store, the men drop Bobby off at an arcade whose name I really like.
The machines are down for compliance testing.
Kinda last minute, don't you think? Also, why would you not close the arcade if you were doing that? Bobby goes to play the only available game in the store, Whack-A-Mole. If you know this episode, then you know what this is foreshadowing. Hank and Dale continue to the store and find a computer easily enough, but when they try to ring it up, this scene happens.
Oh, shoot. Our system is down.
Well, just write me out a receipt.
Sir, the computer is down. I can't sell you a computer. I can't check our inventory. I can't lock the front door.
I have a very complicated relationship with this scene, and my New Year's resolution was to resolve any complicated relationships. So let's dive into it. When people watch this clip on YouTube with no context, they mistakenly think it's a message about the ineptitude of the modern employee.
Haha, look at that useless modern-day employee. Unlike the old-timers, he can't problem solve.
Now, I do believe that's partially what the writers were going for, because the guy specifically says he can't figure out the sales tax, but that is not the point of the scene. The point of the scene is to demonstrate to Hank how much the world has become reliant on computers and what would happen if they were to fail, because remember, Hank doesn't know anything about computers. He himself doesn't work with computers as much as the rest of the world. Another thing that kind of missed me about this scene is that a lot of people tend to agree with Hank that the guy should just write up a physical receipt. Now, that's not an impossibility, but something like that is dependent upon the business, and the farther we get into the future, the less of an option that becomes. If you've ever worked in retail or in fast food, you know how stressful it is when the computers go down. It's not a matter of not wanting to ring someone up the old-fashioned way because it's harder, it's that the higher-ups usually don't want you to. Computers keep track of a bunch of background information when something is purchased. For a lot of businesses, it's not a simple matter of they bought something, so make sure there's enough money in the register. This scene always gets me a little heated because it reminds me of the days where I used to work these types of jobs. The computers go down and your boss won't let you ring anyone up, but all the customers are complaining to you specifically because you're the closest employee they could find, even though it's not your job to fix the store's computers, you just use them. Anyway, back on Rainy Street, Peggy finds out Hank went Christmas shopping. Through a kind of sad scene, she tricks Bill into revealing what Hank is getting her.
Tell me the part about what Hank is getting me for Christmas.
A computer. I said I'd tell you about the brushes. Peggy?
Over at the Gribble house, hey, remember how I said bad things happen when hamsters have their territories invaded?
My do! How could you do this to me, Puff Puff?
Elsewhere at Strickland Propane, Hank is getting ready to deal with a petting mob, and he's gonna have to do it without Buck, who abandoned ship.
Hey, Joe Jack, what do you got left in the tanks?
Tanks are topped out.
I'm gonna put a call in to Texas Propane Commissioner Murray Hogarth. Whoa! My supplier left me holding the... What? What does this have to do with Y2K? But you promised me there are procedures in place.
And this is what does it. This is what makes Hank give into Y2K paranoia. Murray was the authority figure who told Hank that everything would be fine. When the person you look to for stability starts to panic, it becomes much easier for you yourself to lose your cool. Hank does something that everyone thought he would never do. He abandons his post during a propane emergency.
Forgive me, Lord, for what I'm about to do.
I'm sorry, those are 3 full propane tanks, and Hank is not only carrying all of them, but one under his arm. Feeling really emasculated right now. No wonder my New Year's resolution was to work out more. Hank manages to sneak the propane tanks home and begins to talk to Peggy about Y2K.
Peggy, this computer thing could be big. You were right to be worried.
I am panicked that my old computer is going to drag this family down into the depths of chaos.
Notice the gap in topic here. Hank is talking about Y2K when he says this computer thing, while Peggy is specifically talking about her computer. Hank is panicked and just starts thinking computers are a problem altogether, and Peggy agrees with him, misunderstanding what he's saying.
Yeah, let's get rid of that old computer.
Oh, right, exactly, I agree. Oh, he is such a bad actor.
Dale shows up and reveals to Hank that he's been hoarding, but after the hamster gerbil fiasco, he's desperate and needs help. Hank at first doesn't want to give it to him, but Dale reveals he knows about the propane tanks. Realizing he and Dale should be in this together, Hank says he knows a guy.
All right, you're gonna need your own wheat grinder. I'll teach you how to grow your own mung beans and old paper towels.
That's it? This is your go-to, guy?
While Chappie was originally calm about not needing the system, Dale points out that it's not just the system he needs to worry about. If it goes down, it will cause a chain reaction of devastating effects that will lead to an apocalyptic society. This gets Chappie just as panicked as the other two, and the 3 form a plan to work together.
I'll take care of tools and supplies. You guys are in charge of food.
Hank begins to make changes in his life to prepare his house for the grid going down. Instead of getting Peggy a computer, which he thinks will be useless, he decides to go with a grandfather clock.
What happened to your power drill?
It's gone. Got rid of it. Traded it to a fool for a sack of corn.
Bobby, picking up on Hank's panic, begins to panic himself.
We've only got 6 days to stock up on aloe vera quilted toilet paper.
I'll get the truck.
Like I said, when you see the person who keeps you calm start panicking, it makes it much easier for you. Next is the dog pound scene. I'm skipping the dog pound scene. Yes, it's a funny scene, but my New Year's resolution is to force you intellectuals to take some initiative and go watch the episode yourself. Christmas comes to the Hill House, and Hank and Bobby get everyone gifts for the upcoming apocalypse.
Yeah, thanks.
Careful, Luann, they don't call it a mangle for nothing.
Peggy and Luann, however, are not happy with their gifts.
That is not a computer. I do not want a grandfather clock.
And I do not want toilet paper.
I legit love how Luann was being very polite until she saw Peggy blow up. Bobby has his role model and Luann has hers. Also, remember at the beginning when there was a hint that a man couldn't be a minimalist if he had a wife? I think they're kind of cementing that now.
Fine. I'll take the grandfather clock. It's a great grandfather clock.
Ah, I see what you did there. Hank takes the clock to the garage and the cinematography makes sure you know the door is closed.
I'll bet you're ready for the Millennium, Coach Landry. You won 270 games. And all you needed was one clock. Got rid of it.
Hank notices that the clock could use a touch-up. However, with the garage door closed, the fumes of his varnish start to affect him until eventually he passes out.
Hank, I am taking Bobby and Luann to get real presents. Oh, and I'm going to be driving a car if that's okay with you.
The attitude is unnecessary, Peggy. You never had a real conversation about Hank's Y2K worries. In fact, the only reason you're angry is because you expected to get a computer, which only happened because you tricked Bill. Hank, being unconscious, begins to dream of... I can only think of one word to describe how I feel about these things. Hank watches as all his mole friends excitedly go up and risk getting themselves whacked. Hank himself doesn't want to go up and he warns the others. The only mole listening to Hank is Bobby, who is regressing and becoming a baby. You get it? It's a metaphor! Alright, let's get to the Coach Landry mole.
Aren't you scared you're gonna get whacked?
Not every time, Hank. The times you don't, it's pretty sweet. Every time I go up, I see a little more.
So I agree with the lesson this dream sequence is trying to teach. However, it doesn't line up with what Hank is going through in many different ways. Firstly, in the dream, Hank is surrounded by other moles who are eager to go up. Hank tries to convince them not to, but it doesn't work. This is opposite of what actually happened. In the real world, Hank was the one remaining calm, telling others that they didn't need to worry about the future. It was only when his wife, his friends, and his superiors started panicking did Hank finally give in to the mass hysteria. The next thing is that Hank is denying the chance to get fresh air because he's scared of getting whacked. The metaphor is that he's afraid to try something that could lead to a positive result because it could also lead to a negative result. Correlate this to the real world and it translates to Hank being afraid of the future or Hank being afraid of computers, since that's what Y2K is about. But neither of those are true. What Hank is afraid of is being unprepared for a system that might fail. Hank watched how the computer store guy couldn't do anything without a computer and was told the propane industry was falling apart because of them. So he was trying to prep for a world that would last without computers. Yes, he went to an extreme by getting rid of Peggy's computer, but mainly because he didn't want the family to be reliant on it. And finally, Mole Hank knows that someone is actively trying to hurt him. The whole reason Whack-A-Mole starts up is because someone wants to hit them. Real Hank is just guessing that something bad is going to happen. Well, there goes my New Year's resolution of not over-explaining things. After his dream, Hank manages to wake up and get himself out of the garage. At night, he gets his family together and prepares to burn all the useless gifts he got them.
There really is nothing to be afraid of about this millennium. The year 2000 only happens once in the history of man, and we're darn lucky to see it happen.
Okay, this speech makes no sense. The episode forgot what Hank was actually afraid of. He wasn't afraid of the year 2000. He was afraid of computers not working properly, which again, I remind you, was a real issue with computers. It's just one that got fixed in time. And I gotta say, I really don't like them burning all this stuff. Like, I get it, it's supposed to be them burning their fears, but Hank still spent money on all of this stuff, and toilet paper lasts in storage for a really long time. He could still use it, or shoot, give it away. Further cementing his trust that everything will be okay, Hank buys Peggy a new computer for her office.
A system? Really?
A blueberry one. It'll be here tomorrow.
Dude, really? Spending even more money? And that was Millennium. It's a fun episode. It hits the usual King of the Hill marks. Good character moments, good comedy, and an okay-ish lesson to present about society. It does kind of fall apart at the end though. The mole metaphor and the burning of the gifts, while memorable, completely forgot what Hank's fears were. Also, we never really get closure of what Dale and Chappie are up to, nor what happened at Strickland Propane. A lot of people compare this episode to the recent pandemic, but honestly, other than the hoarding thing and the toilet paper jokes, I didn't see many comparisons. The way the people in this episode panic feels very different than how we panic. We being relative, the pandemic irritated me more than anything. Now, we can't end the first King of the Hill video of the year without a moral of some sort, right? I mean, this is a Shady Doorags video. Well, I suppose I could say that us in the real world are going through something similar to this episode. After 3 just downright awful years of tension, fear, and anger, many are afraid that 2023 could be just as bad, if not worse. I can't say that won't happen, but what I can say is that fear is lessened by experience and preparation. Take what you've learned over these last 3 years and use it to make the best of this upcoming one. As I've stated multiple times in this video, prepare ahead of time when it's convenient. And I'm not just talking about stocking up on supplies. Don't wait until things get bad to start prepping for things being bad. And even if something does catch us by surprise, as humans, adapting is our specialty. Despite all the bad we've gone through these past years, you can still look forward to the good. Don't let your fear of what's happened in the past prevent you from having a great future. I could say all that, but my New Year's resolution is to be less preachy, so I don't know, go full panic mode, I guess. This has been Shady Doorags. So long, farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye.